Okay, so today's unit or today's lesson is starting our introduction to argument mini unit. So I've created a new topic under classwork on Google Classroom called Unit 3, and I moved all of the major paper materials to Unit 3. So we've now moved out of the In Cold Blood unit and we're now into the Unit 3. So even though it's still sort of related to In Cold Blood, and you could use material from In Cold Blood, and we might also be kind of coming back to In Cold Blood a little bit, we still are primarily focusing on some of these basic components of argument and drafting our major papers. So today we are going to start in our language of composition book. So for those of you who are at home and just watching this video, create a new slide in your skills notebook and take notes on pages 101 through 108 of the language of composition on the various types of evidence. So you can just make a slide that you call types of evidence or evidence and write about those various types of evidence. You need to be thinking about what is the most appropriate sort of evidence for my paper, and thinking about whether or not you want to use anecdotes or data or both, and in which situations are either of those things appropriate. So after you finish that, read Prison and the Poverty Trap by John Tierney. This is part of your materials for day 8, and I've also linked a slide that says evaluating evidence. So I want you to think about what is the argument of the article, and I think that the title kind of gives it away, but what's the argument of the article, and what are some pieces of evidence that Tierney is using to support that particular argument? So if you look at, we'll go to the analyzing or ranking evidence. If you look at this document, you'll see that there's a place for you to write the title, the author, and then pieces of evidence. And you could do more than this. I've got spaces for like 5 different pieces of evidence. Just write down the pieces of evidence first. So don't worry about their rank at first. So just find 5 different places within the article that the writer is using information. It could be anecdotal, it could be statistics, etc., to support a point that he is making. And then after you've written down those pieces of evidence, consider which one do you think is most effective. We're not all going to have the same answers for this. I think that, definitely we won't have the same answers for this, but I think you've got to decide, what are you thinking about in your ranking? So are you thinking about what's most interesting? Are you thinking about what's most reliable? Are you thinking about what's most applicable to the thesis? And then in the analysis part, you would sort of explain your basic reasoning for that rank. So then after we do that, we are just going to talk a little bit about taking your notes. Next class, Monday, Tuesday, we will take an open note MLA quiz. So for those of you who are at home, you won't have to zoom in for it because it will be open note. So you can use Google searches and you can use your notes or whatever. But I do want everybody to understand some sort of basic MLA information. For where we are right now, basically what's on this slide is what you need to know to take your notes well. So make it clear when you're quoting or paraphrasing. If your source has page numbers, you should be noting those each time you write down a note, and then write down the MLA citation first after you decide you're going to use a source. For many of the sources, especially the ones that are available through our library, that individual source will create an MLA citation for you. So if you watch the videos that Ms. Hall created in that LibGuide, then you'll be able to figure out where those citations are. So I think it's really important that you do that first. Sometimes you find a source and then you don't put down the MLA citation, and so then you take a bunch of notes and then you can't find it again later, and that gets really frustrating. So just making sure that you have that information first. Remember that the works cited is going to be the first piece of the paper that you turn in, and then I will be grading that works cited for accuracy. So the next slide basically just explains to you or gives you the link to the library guide. So I'm just going to click on that and show you guys what Ms. Hall has set up for us. And we'll be using this basic website for various assignments that we do in class. So these are all of the databases that are useful for the paper. And so up at the top, you see where it says access database passwords here. So if you're at home and you need the database passwords to do research, then this is where you can find them. Over here on the left, you will see the video overviews that she's given, and she has very much tailored all of these to our particular assignment, which is very, very helpful. And so I think that, definitely watch those. Probably a smart way to do it would be to, sorry, I got off the thing. Probably a smart way to do it would be to watch a video. So like watch the video for CQ Researcher and then see what you can find in CQ Researcher. Watch the video for opposing viewpoints and then figure it out. I think that the way that she has these listed is actually helpful. I do think CQ Researcher is a great kind of overview source. Opposing vote viewpoints is very, very useful for the kind of paper that we are doing. So, and then you can see here in the center where she has actually linked a reference book that is all about criminal justice reform. And so that would also be very, very useful. So, and then over here, she has a citation maker listed. She has the email addresses of the librarians. And then down here in the right-hand corner, she has some of the things that we have done in class. Not all of these are things we've actually read because we didn't get to everything, but you can definitely give them a look. We did do these two, and then we're actually reading an additional source today that's not listed, so I'll see if she can add that to that list. So that is what you're going to use. And then the one other thing that is listed in your class materials that I did want to look at is the graphic organizer for the assignment. We'll talk about this maybe a little bit more when we talk about writing thesis statements, etc. But I think that this is a really good note-taking guide for you. So up at the top, it has a place for you to write sort of a working thesis statement. So that doesn't have to be a thesis that you have completely worked out. It doesn't have to be exactly what you want, but you've done some reading and you have an idea. And then here it has a place for you to kind of come up with your talking points. And essentially those would just be the reasons for each body paragraph. Those would be the various points that you want to make. And then on part 2, this is where you would actually start taking notes from your sources. So you see I have like source A, source B, source C. That doesn't really matter. You can just type in the source. So like I could go here, and if I wanted to use the Bryan Stevenson TED Talk, I could just write Stevenson TED Talk. And then up at the top, you would write your point that you want to make. So let's say that you want to say the death penalty shouldn't be used because it's not actually a deterrent to crime. So you could make not a deterrent to crime your point. And then you would go through your sources that you have found, and you're probably not going to have 6, but you can go through the sources that you've found, and you could write down notes for each source that has a note that corresponds well to that point. So then the idea would be that when you actually start writing your paper, that you could just go down this column and you could write your paper using those quotations and those paraphrases and then adding your commentary, and you basically would just be writing your body paragraph. So you don't have to have every box on this filled up. I'm not going to necessarily check this. I do really suggest it as a way to organize your thoughts, but if you have something better figured out, then by all means use it. So you don't have to have 4 points. You don't have to have 6 sources, but I do think this is a useful note-taking guide for the type of assignment we're doing and for the length that it is. And we'll be revisiting this when we look at the synthesis essays for our exam as well. So that's a basic overview for those of you who are not able to make it to the Zoom today. Let me know if you have any questions, and remember that your homework assignment is to have 2 sources when you come back to class next time.